Welcome to Wrestling with Hart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Hart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show, and it wouldn't be Wrestling with Hart without this guy here. I am pleased to welcome one of the members of the legendary Hart Family, the one and only Ross Hart. Welcome, Ross, to Wrestling with Hart.
Nice to meet you, Stanley. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So you're from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Second youngest son in the family?
Yes, that's correct. And third youngest in the whole family, and second youngest son. Out of a family of 12.
Amazing. Going back all these years, Calgary has got such a chock full history of wrestling, lore, and so many legends. Among those are the Hart family. So talk to me about your first exposure to professional wrestling.
Well, my dad was promoting as far back as late 40s. I was born in 1960. So it was probably about 4 years old that I can remember watching it on television every Saturday. We would televise the matches on Friday night at the Pavilion in Calgary, and then it would be aired on television on Saturday afternoons. So I was watching it every Saturday. It was really exciting. I'd see some pretty big names like Sweet Daddy Siki, um, Dave Rule, Waldo Von Erich, Stan Stasiak, Gene Kiniski, some of them. And I would watch it every Saturday, even before I started going to school. And then when I was about 5 years old, I guess, I got to go to two live shows, which was really exciting. I actually got to go to the Pavilion and see the live shows there, and that was pretty neat. Just being around the crowd and being a little closer to the ring and watching the action live. And then I started going to the matches after that, and I was doing everything from selling programs to working security. Then later, kind of graduated to TV production and sometimes performing on the shows and booking some of the matches and running the dressing room. So a whole lot of different roles.
Yeah, so working in all different facets of the industry. First impressions of wrestling, were you just like, wow, this is incredible?
Yeah, it was exciting because we grew up with it, and we we had a lot of wrestlers that would come over and visit. Some who actually were training with my dad in the infamous dungeon in the basement. So our lives really were very much influenced by wrestling. We were watching on television. We had shows every night. My dad would usually be on the road. You'd be going to different cities almost every night. So everything kind of evolved around wrestling. Our office was right in the house where we were. It was right beside our bedroom. So my mom and dad would be taking phone calls. My dad would be talking to other promoters. He might be talking to Frank Tunney or Vince McMahon Sr. or someone about booking talent. Wrestlers would be calling to get booked. Some local wrestlers would be calling about where they were meeting for their rides to the next show. So the office was sort of the hub in the household for all the activities with wrestling. So I would see that and hear that all the time. So I was pretty much consumed with it, but and I just sort of idolized a lot of these guys that I watched on TV, and some who my dad had trained or had a very positive influence on. So it was exciting, and it was really big, in Calgary at that time. Everybody used to watch it on TV, and then we had shows every Friday night at the Pavilion. So it was exciting, to be there to watch the matches, but also be kind of surrounded by it 7 days a week.
Who were some of your favorites growing up that you got to watch and got to go see live?
Boy, in the earlier days, probably Archie the Stomper Goldie was one of my favorites. He was really intense, and he had some great matches, some great rivalries with guys like Dave Rule and Waldo Von Erich and Stan Stasiak, so many others. Abdullah the Butcher. A few years later, he came in and he was a real hardcore brawler, but he was so unpredictable, and it was always exciting watching him. Quite often there'd be a lot of blood spilled in his matches, um, but it was exciting watching him. Billy Robinson, who is such a great technician in the ring. You know, uh, he was the first one that I saw throwing a lot of suplexes and those lifters and uppercuts, that were very foreign to North American rings. Um, then years later, guys like Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, when they came over from the UK, they were just phenomenal. Their speed, their acrobatics, and then my brothers, um, Bruce and Keith, were wrestling in the 70s, and then Bret in the late 70s. Bret broke in, and Bret had just a tremendous career. He was just a real natural, but it was really impressive watching him in some of his matches with Dynamite Kid, and he and Keith had some really classic tag matches with these Japanese guys who actually trained Bret how to wrestle, Mr. Hito and Mr. Sakurada. And Dory Funk was one of the best world champions I can recall of all time. Terry Funk was really good. Harley Race was a really formidable champion. Had some classic matches. Andre the Giant was always neat to see. Quite often he'd be in a battle royal or he'd be in a handicap match against two other guys. But he was a real legend and a unique, one of a kind performer.
He was an attraction.
He was.
Now, at what point did you decide I actually want to get into this business as a performer? Do you remember the moment where you decided I got to go pursue this?
Well, I dabbled a little bit with wrestling, but years earlier I was helping out in other ways. Even like when I was in high school, I would help my mom in the office sometimes with the payroll, and I kind of knew which wrestlers had been performing on the road, and so sometimes she would check with me and say which wrestlers wrestled in which towns and which ones do we have to pay, and I kind of knew a lot of that information, even though I wasn't at a lot of the shows. But I used to just kind of study and memorize the lineups of the matches. So I used to help her with the payroll quite often on Fridays, and then I started helping write the program articles. And we had a program called the Body Press that came out every week, and um, I really enjoyed writing. I enjoyed writing in school, like language arts classes and journalism and creative writing. So I started writing, with a little guidance and editing from my mom. And then I became sort of a correspondent for different wrestling magazines about Stampede Wrestling. I would send results and reports, about different matches and feuds and newcomers that were really catching on in the territory. So I started doing a lot of that, and typing releases for advertisers for the out of town shows. So I was doing a lot of that, and even TV production with Stampede Wrestling before I ever stepped in the ring in a match. And that probably wasn't until the mid 80s, that I actually had my first match. And but I was pretty well schooled in other aspects of wrestling, the booking side, the creative side, the television side. I had exposure to all those fields, before I actually stepped in the ring as a performer.
Now, with all that knowledge that you were gaining, behind the scenes, entering the ring is a whole different animal on itself because it's a lot of physicality, and you're not used to working, your body in certain ways. Talk to me about training. I'm sure you got to train in the dungeon as well with your dad.
Yeah, I can tell you it's certainly different being a performer in the ring than just watching it. When you're in the ring, you're the one being watched um, by fans. Your peers and other wrestlers are watching you, and you're nervous and you don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to mess up on a high spot or embarrass yourself. So it's intimidating, the first few matches, and if you're lucky, you're working with a really experienced veteran, a good heel that can lead you and call a spot and just call matches and help you relax. And all you do is listen to them, just follow their lead, and that really helps. I've worked with guys like Gamma Singh or the Cuban Assassin or Jerry Morrow, guys who had been in the industry for 20, 30 years. And it was so much easier working with them because they would guide you through the whole match. And the fans couldn't even tell, they were very fluid, but you couldn't detect they're communicating with wrestlers in the ring. They were really good at sort of lip syncing and calling the spots, and you just listened to them and did them, and then all you had to really remember was the finish, and maybe one or two spots that you'd maybe worked out before the match. But so it's certainly nerve-wracking and intimidating the first times you step in the ring, or if you're working with somebody you've never ever been in the ring with before. But it gets better and better each time, with more experience and as you gain a little more confidence. But and really, you shouldn't do a move in a ring or in a match that you haven't practiced. But sometimes, the guy you're working with will call it, and you just have to do it. And if they might call duck the clothesline, cross body kick out, clothesline again, two arm drags, and you have to be ready to perform and execute, whatever's called, even if you haven't actually practiced it beforehand. But the training, there's a lot of work that goes into that, and we certainly did train in the dungeon. The dungeon didn't have um, it had just a mat, but it didn't have ropes. It didn't have turnbuckles. So it was basically just where you did a lot of mat wrestling, and it had a very low ceiling. It had only about a 6.5 foot clearing. So it was fine for learning basic takedowns and counters, but it really wasn't good for doing stuff like off the top ropes or aerial maneuvers. But it and really that's what you should be learning first. You should be learning all your mat wrestling and things that come out of lockups and takeovers and reversals, and that's what we did. We would do that for months before we ever worked out in a ring, and did things off the top ropes or any aerial maneuvers or things like that. So it was better because too many guys, when they're breaking in, they want to do all the high spots and stuff off the ropes, but they haven't been well versed in mat or chain wrestling, and that has to come first.
Now, when you're learning all these maneuvers, you talked about a few minutes ago about having to improvise. Was there a moment where you were wrestling someone and right off the bat, someone had basically decided, hey, let's try this, and you didn't know what to do, and you had to kind of adjust?
Um, I can't think of anything in particular like that. I know there are sometimes finishes that were not executed right. They were botched, and then you'd have to go into something else, right? Um, I've had situations where we were working and we are supposed to maybe go like 20 minutes, and then the referee got a signal we had to wrap things up earlier, maybe because of a television time or something, and then we would have to condense or shorten the match. So you always had to be ready, especially when it was TV production. There's always a chance that you would be given the communication that the match had to go shorter, and or sometimes that you had to put in longer time, right? That you had to go a longer period. So usually the referee who had a a hearing cue, from the dressing room, or maybe a signal from the timekeeper that the match had to go longer. They would communicate that to us, and usually the referee was really a good guy. They would tell us when it was time to go home. They had a good idea when it was close to that time. If it was like 15 minutes and the timekeeper called 15 minutes, then they would say go home, when it's time to go into the finish.
What was like when you're learning from people that you've worked with over the years, mentors and family members, when you're learning how to wrestle, any pieces of advice that you picked up from them that you've been able to apply to after your time in the ring that you can still recall?
Well, I think if you're a young guy breaking in who hasn't had a lot of matches, it's important to do well what you can do, right? Stick with what works for you. Don't try something you haven't done, right? Um, don't copy somebody else's finishing move. Don't use somebody else's finishing move like a sleeper or a shoulder breaker as a high spot, because you've just ruined that guy's finishing hold if you've used it as a high spot in your match. Um, if you're on a card, you should be watching matches preceding you. So when you go out and wrestle, you're not doing the same thing. You're not working somebody's arm like somebody else in a prior match has. So you should be aware of all those things. You know, be be enthusiastic in the ring. Show facial expressions. If you're a baby face, yeah, you should smile, right? You should acknowledge the fans, and you should call on them for support. When you're selling and taking a beating, you try to get them to lift you, but don't overdo that. You don't want to be over dramatic or overselling. But when you're making your comeback, let the crowd fire you up, like so call on the fans and get their feedback, and they want to see you knock the crap out of that heel that's been cheating and kicking the crap out of you and injuring you and making you suffer. So, this is your chance to get some revenge, some payback. So, you really want to get that support from the fans to do that, right? So, they want to see you nail that son of a gun, and get some retribution or some revenge, right? So it's important. And if you're a heel, you have to play your part. You have to be cocky, be disdainful. You should be arrogant with the fans, because as a heel, you don't want to be splitting the audience between you and the babyface. Then it's sort of a mixed reaction. So you should really ignore fans that are cheering for you and actually just be as uncivil and disrespectful as you can, and to an extent, right? Not don't go overboard. Don't be racist or homophobic or anything, but you're really disdainful and arrogant with the fans, and that's apparent in everything you do, and you're a rule breaker. You're cheating. You're trying to get away with as much as you can, and um, and when it's time for the baby face to have their shine and you give them their comeback, you've got to really play your part. You've got to sell and fly and take bumps for them and really convince the fans, hey, this the crowd favorite of the baby face is getting his revenge here. He's paying back the heel for all the rule breaking and the crap that he's gotten away with in the match. So I think that's important, right? To play your role in the match, but really involve the fans in what you do.
Yeah, you got to really channel that energy and try to get into that character as much as possible without uh, blurring the lines, so to speak. You want to be able to uh, remain in character, but also don't go too crazy. Don't go too far. You try to stay in that lane. Now you make your debut. You're working for Stampede. I'd imagine when you first start wrestling, um, it's hard. It's rough because you get nervous and afraid. But how do you kind of channel that energy to start turning things around and make it a positive moment out of it?
Well, I think it's just important to relax, when you're in the ring, and especially if you're working with an experienced veteran or leader, they will settle you down, and all you have to do is listen to them. If you're the less experienced guy, let the experienced guy call the match and just follow his lead. And then you'll relax and um, you'll be less nervous and you won't be using as much energy up, right? You'll be relaxed and um, that really improves your concentration, but also your stamina and your wind because when you're nervous, you're breathing hard and you're not relaxing. So it's really important that you're um, you're settled and you have confidence in the guy you're working with, and just remember the finish. That's the most important part of the match. And everything leading up to it. To get yourself over and the guy that you're working with. And my philosophy is that it takes two to have a good match, and it's important that you do whatever you can to get your opponent over, and he does whatever he can to get you over, and you're just safe. You respect each other, and you're not stiffing each other. You're not injuring each other, right? Like everything you do has to be safe and well executed. You don't want to be injuring guys, right? So just be safe and use etiquette. Don't use finishing moves as high spots. Don't steal other people's moves, and don't repeat what fans have seen in earlier matches. So that's why it's important when you're on a show, you view the preceding matches. So when you go out there, you do something totally different, and the fans have a different experience in your match than the other ones they saw.
You'll want to have your own style while paying homage to the people that you grew up watching, so that you have your own flavor, but staying true to those that you idolized and grew up watching over the years. Memories of Bret and Owen, getting the chance to interact with them and to be in the ring with them.
Yeah, it was great. Both Bret and Owen were really good amateurs. They wrestled in elementary, junior high, high school, and in university as well. They were collegiate wrestlers. They probably could have qualified for the Canadian national team, maybe the Olympics. They didn't go that far with it, but they were really good amateur wrestlers. My dad was quite proud of them. I wrestled with Owen on the university team here in Calgary, and he was a really good wrestler. And I watched Bret when I was a little younger. I was 2 years younger than Bret. Bret, he just had good technique, good balance, and I think we were natural wrestlers, but we learned a lot from my dad and our older brothers that wrestled before us. But when Bret broke in, it was exciting. He was the first Hart in a few years to make his debut. Bruce and Keith had already been wrestling for a few years, and they were well established. When Bret started out, he was only, I think, about 19 or 20. He was pretty young. And he just had so much fire, so much appeal. Young fans liked him, old fans liked him. He was um, a sensation, because he was Stu's next son to get into wrestling. But everything Bret did, he earned. He unlike some promoters' sons, who got a push because they were um, promoters' sons, and they had some name recognition, but they really didn't have much technique. Bret was a really natural wrestler, and it really helped that he had some good guys to work with. He worked with Dynamite Kid. He worked with the guys who trained him a lot, Hito and Sakurada. Leo Burke was another one. Bret had some classic matches with Dr. D, David Schultz. Um, so Bret, I could say, was just a natural, and he got better and better. With each year of wrestling, and then then he went to Japan and wrestled there. He wrestled in Germany, he wrestled in the UK, and he was well versed in all styles. And it really wasn't a shock that he made it in the WWE. It took a little while for him to get established there, um, because he was well known in Canada, but he had to really prove himself in WWF. And there were older, more established guys, that were kind of ahead of him. So Bret worked hard. He worked in tag teams with Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and um, he excelled in tag team matches, but he was also a really good singles wrestler. And when the time was right, he made his move in singles, and then they switched him to a baby face, and then he had a great run as a world champion. And with Bret, I always felt he had the talent, but sometimes it just took the right promoter or booker to recognize that and to give him that opportunity. Owen started a few years later, but he was just a real natural. He was maybe a little more high flying, a little more agile than Bret, but a very good technical wrestler as well. Um, and Owen was just incredible. He could do backflips and somersaults from the top ropes, and he was just phenomenal. But he always practiced those things so carefully. He would have a spotter, and he would do that backflip off the top rope and land perfectly on his feet. But that took a lot of practice. It didn't just come naturally on the first try. But Owen always made sure he worked on it, before he executed in the ring, because he didn't want to go out there and go sideways or slip or fall. So he wanted it to look really polished and smooth, and it did. And um, Owen was just a really great technician, and just had some phenomenal matches. Worked kind of as a cruiserweight or a mid heavyweight for the first few years, and really excelled in Japan and UK and Germany, where they use smaller guys. And then eventually got a pretty good break in the WWE, and did that storyline where he worked heel against Bret, as the jealous younger brother, and they just had some phenomenal, incredible matches there, and it was real testament to what they had both learned from the Stampede style and carried with them all those years.
Were there plans for you to join them? Did you ever think about wanting to go to the WWE at some point?
I kind of knew that I wouldn't get that far. I didn't have the size, Stanley, and by the time I was in my late 20s, I kind of knew, I was probably not going to make it on that level. So, I still wrestled occasionally. I would quite often wrestle on smaller tours, but I really wasn't trying to compete with Owen or Bret, who were more established stars. And I was more behind the scenes then. So I was writing programs. I was training guys in the dungeon with my brother Bruce. I was doing TV production, so I was contributing in a lot of ways. But I kind of knew that I maybe didn't have quite the size or the athleticism, to make it on that level that like Bret or Owen or Dynamite or Davey, and that was fine with me. I was happy with my involvement with wrestling and what I contributed, and and that was good for me. I had no regrets. I just contributed in a lot of ways. Kind of a different builder category.
Over the course of your career, you've gotten to wrestle against so many different opponents. Who are some of your favorite opponents that you've gotten to wrestle against over the years?
Um, Boy, I think I mentioned the Cuban Assassin, Jerry Morrow. They wrestled as the Cuban Commandos. They were really good, an excellent tag team. They were good heels, and they could call a great match. Um, and they could make anybody look good, even the most inexperienced or limited wrestler. But I always felt safe with those guys, and they would put together a whole match. And I never had to do much but just listen to them. Gamma Singh was another one. His son Raj Singh has done really well, and his nephew Jinder Mahal, was very successful in the WWE. So Gamma was a good veteran as well. Makan Singh, who was a big star with Stampede Wrestling. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but he was really good. A big guy. He must have been about 380 pounds, but he was so safe to work with, and even with the size difference, he made me look like a star. Like I could almost maybe beat him in the ring. And for the fans, that was important. That it wasn't just a mismatch. Even with the size difference, but guys like them were really safe and easy to work with.
You got to wrestle all over the world. Do you have a favorite country that you got to wrestle in?
Well, I think I liked audiences in Canada and the States. I didn't wrestle a lot out of Western Canada. I wrestled in Montana a little bit, but I had some interesting tours. When I first actually broke in, I had my very first match in Budapest, Hungary, 1983, and it was kind of um, a tournament where they brought in different wrestlers from Germany and France and the UK. So that was quite interesting. It was like a soccer stadium, and there must have been about 20,000 fans there, and that was pretty exciting. My very first match, and I didn't even use my real name. I think I went under some name as Gerard Merce or something like that, and that's what I was called. And then I wrestled in the UK with Owen. We wrestled as a tag team, and that was great. We wrestled some really experienced guys like Fit Finley and Skull Murphy. And that was great. Those were some pretty top-notch guys that we worked with. Marty Jones was another one. So that was great, to have that opportunity to wrestle in front of different audiences. And I always liked the Canadian audiences because they demanded and expected good wrestling, and if you performed well, they they reciprocated. You got a good ovation, and if you didn't, well, you didn't. And um, it was kind of understood. If you work hard and you perform well for fans, they will reciprocate, and they'll respond. And that to me was the best reaction that a match got over, right? When the crowd responded and they were really on fire.
Yeah, the fans are the backbone of professional wrestling because I feel like you can hear the applause or the boos whenever you're coming out or whenever you're doing a move that gets them on their feet. You need to hear, that reaction. It really can make or break a wrestling show, is that reaction. Um,
Absolutely.
so getting to train so many people in the dungeon. Talk about that experience, because I think that's really amazing.
Yeah, my brother Bruce had established the Hart Brothers training camp in the 80s with my brother Keith, and they trained a lot of guys there, some from scratch, some kind of broken elsewhere, and then further trained in the dungeon, and developed their skills. But everybody from Brian Pillman to Hiro Hase, um, Jushin Liger, Kichi Yamada from Japan. A lot of those guys, and Chris Benoit is another one that trained in the dungeon. So I I had a hand in developing and training some of those guys in the 80s, and then when my dad had closed the wrestling promotion down, he'd actually sold the promotion to the WWE in the 80s, and we finally closed the promotion down, I think in 1990, end of 89 or 1990. There was kind of a hiatus, and there was no wrestling for a while, and then my brother Bruce and I kind of decided to start the promotion up again, and we knew there was a lot of young talent, that wanted to break in BC and Alberta, and a few guys from the States came up as well. So that was great. I had a chance to train and develop my nephew Harry, Davy Boy Smith's son, um, Tyson Kidd, Natalia, my niece, my nephew Teddy. Um, all these guys broke in the dungeon, and you know, I had a hand, in training them. I'd say Bruce was their primary teacher, and Bruce is probably one of the most experienced, qualified teachers in the industry. He just knows so much about psychology and how to get a match over and character development. He was just a master at that. So I learned a lot from him, but and then I was kind of his assistant coach, and we had an opportunity to train some pretty good stars, and then there are quite a few in the Calgary area, guys like Duke Durango and Pistol Greg Pollock and Hot Shot Johnny Devine. They all turned out to be really good performers.
I think it's so amazing to see the next generation of talents, really take shape in professional wrestling. And it's so cool to see that legacy of the Hart family continue on, especially. What has been your favorite part about training new stars?
Um, well, I can sort of speak for my nephew Harry and niece Natalia and Tyson Kidd, who was practically a nephew that we raised, in our family. I think for me, what I'm really proud of is they they learned the fundamentals of wrestling, but they weren't just copycats. They all had their own style and their own innovative moves, and came up with their own um, offense and finishing moves. So they didn't just sort of redo something that somebody else did, but they came across as very unique and innovative stars, even though they were third generation stars, whose fathers and uncles, were a major influence on them. But um, so I'm really proud that they um, lived up to their names, and made us and their fans proud, that they were good technicians, good performers in the ring, and that they did well everywhere they went. Um, they did well in the WWE. Natalia is still there. I think she's been there longer than any other woman in the WWE roster. Harry is still doing very well, but he's focusing more on wrestling in Japan. He really likes the All Japan style, and um, so I'm just very very proud of what they've accomplished in a very competitive industry, and just their tremendous work ethic. They train hard, they work hard, and every opportunity they've been given, they've made the most of. So.
Wrestling has changed so much over the years. I'm sure, as we're talking here, you've kept up with the current product. What are your thoughts about contemporary professional wrestling?
Um, well, it's exciting. I think it's there's tremendous popularity for wrestling right now. Even though there's less mystique about wrestling, and there's been probably overexposure on the social media about it, and a lot of fans maybe figure they know the outcomes of matches and who's going to wrestle who, and it's predetermined. But it's still exciting to watch. It's still very athletic. Um, it's uh, it's great seeing a variety of styles. We're seeing some really strong Japanese wrestlers, some really top-notch talent coming from the UK, the Lucha Libre style from Mexico, and some great performers from Canada and the States, and then even as far as India, and places like Australia, there's just huge demand for wrestling, and it's a competitive industry, and not everybody's going to make it. It's almost like the music industry or the acting industry. A lot of people will only go so far with it just because there's so much competition. Sometimes you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But um, I genuinely feel though that if you have talent and you have desire and you really work hard, you have as good an opportunity as anybody, and the star is the limit. And you've got tremendous potential, and it's worth pursuing. And you have to put your heart and passion into it. You have to make a lot of sacrifices because sometimes working on the smaller promotions, you don't make a lot of money, and you have to get your experience somewhere and get established. And again, try to make sure you're working with some very experienced veterans, so you're not getting hurt, and you're learning from experienced, seasoned guys in the ring. So you really need to work for some credible promotions, but build up a resume of matches, and then do whatever you can to try and get a tryout with AEW or WWE. And it's just important that you look the part of an athlete. You have good gear. If you're going to wrestle, you have to invest in a good outfit and tights and boots. 'Cause nothing looks worse than somebody that comes in the ring and they don't even have a pair of proper tights or boots, and they can't even afford a ring jacket. So it's important that you look professional, you look flashy, you have some kind of an outfit, you have some kind of a name that really complements you, and and make the most of that, because that's your character, that's your personality. So you really need to flaunt it, but you also have to look like a real athlete in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, you got to show a lot of dedication and devotion to the business and look the part as well, like you're talking about here. It's that believability, that we the fans want to get into that larger than life aspect of character building.
That's right, Stanley.
Are there any wrestlers today that like you go, man, this guy, this girl's really amazing. I love their work. I'm a huge fan.
Boy, um, Cara Valkyrie from the WWE impresses me a lot. She's a really hard worker, good performer. Stephanie Vacquer, I'm probably mispronouncing her name, but
Vaquer, yeah.
Yeah, very talented. Io Sky, just a tremendous worker. Just they consistently have good matches. So I know I've kind of focused on some of the females there. Randy Orton, a really good technician, good performer. He's a good veteran, and he's over, and he looks great. He's had some injuries, but still a really good performer. I'm really inspired by Roman Reigns. He's been through a lot of injuries and survived cancer, and still looks great. Has some incredible matches. Cody Rhodes, it's great to see him. Kind of reinvent himself. He went through a lot of lean years there, and now he's over as a phenomenal star. And very believable. And just a great in-ring performer. John Cena's had an incredible career, and it looks like he's gonna have a nice send off, with his final few matches this year, and then probably focus on acting. But yeah, there's just um, so many good performers. Brian Danielson, who's kind of heading toward the end of his career. Christian and Edge, some of these guys with AEW, just great performers. Some of them were outstanding in singles, some in tag team matches. Very, very impressed with them.
Yeah, those are some real good ones for sure. Now, outside of wrestling, I know you've been involved with a lot of charity work and have done so many different projects, including being able to run in a very special race. Let's talk about that.
Well, it was it was a walk or a run. I probably wouldn't have beaten too many in a race, but it was the Terry Fox Run for Cancer though. And it was a 10-kilometer distance, and it was great. I participated in that. I think I've participated in just about every one over the last 15 years, and this year was really meaningful because my niece Jade, Bret the Hitman's daughter, has survived cancer, and we're hoping that she's beaten it for sure. But I dedicated my run to her, and it was great. I was able to complete the event and raise over $1,000 for the Hart family name, and that was great. I just think it's so important to try and raise funds and awareness of cancer so that we can finally beat it.
What
And
ma-
yeah, I do some stage acting, and I love performing on stage, sometimes comedies or dramas. And I just retired from a 40-year teaching career. I taught
Congratulations.
high school English, and now I've kind of stepped away from that a little bit. I'm going to be substitute teaching, but I'm hoping to focus a little more on some writing projects, and maybe write some kind of autobiography or just memoirs about my memories of the business of the wrestling industry.
That'd be great. You
Yeah.
certainly have a lot of stories to tell. I've seen a lot of changes over the years. What made you decide to participate in the Terry Fox run? Because you said you'd been doing it for over 15 years.
Yeah, just looking at how he inspired people, when he went on his walk across Canada, he had a wooden leg, and that was his goal, to get all the way from one end of Canada to the other. And it was just such an inspirational story, that he did the walk, and he'd gotten about halfway across Canada, starting in the Atlantic, and then when he was in Ontario, unfortunately, his cancer came back, and he had to give up the run, and that was really heartbreaking for him, and he wanted to complete the run, but he died shortly after, in a hospital in BC. But it was just so inspirational that he did that on his own, without teammates or anybody. It was just his goal, his dream to walk across Canada and try and raise funds and awareness for cancer. And it's become such a big charity event every year since his passing. And um, so that personally inspired me. And the passing of my brother Smith, who unfortunately lost his life to prostate cancer. But on a positive note, my brothers Bret and Keith survived cancer, and that was very inspirational to me. That they beat cancer, and my niece Jade has overcome the odds, and we're hoping that she's completely cancer free now.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard, having family members and people that you've known for so many years battle this severe disease, illness. Um, you got to be thinking, in your head, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run as fast as I can and really try to make a difference in my community when to honor people, that are going through such a hard time.
Absolutely. It's a lot of cancer victims have just shown so much courage and tenacity and resilience, regardless of the outcome. And there have been some incredible survival stories, of guys that beat cancer. It's just amazing. So it's definitely worth the fight, and if these people can overcome the odds, after they've experienced chemotherapy and radiation and all the other hardships, it's the least someone I can do, the least something, a person like I can do is um, to raise funds and awareness of cancer, and just get the message out that it's important to get tested, right? See your doctor regularly, have a safe lifestyle, really abstain from smoking or inhaling anything hazardous, and always get checked, making sure you're seeing your physicians early, because that early diagnosis really makes a difference.
Definitely does. And to you, Ross, what is it about giving back to the community that gives you the most joy?
Um, it's great that I see people and they thank me that our family entertained them, or provided Stampede Wrestling for them, for the as an opportunity to see live stars in action. You know, Everywhere from the small gyms to the native reservations to the boys and girls clubs, where we performed all over. And it's great hearing that feedback from fans, that they had so many great memories and that we positively influenced them in different ways, that we helped raise funds for their teams and different charity groups that we were associated with. So it's great, because without the fans, we never would have made it that far. We never would have had that much fame or success.
Yeah, I mean, you got to pay it forward, one step at a time, and you just never know what people are going through. And I think it's incredible that you've been able to make a positive impact on so many people, you and your family, for all these years. So, kudos to you for being able to take that step and to go out there and really make a difference.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Stanley, and um, my 65 years, I've been very blessed to be involved in the wrestling industry and be surrounded by a lot of great athletes, great performers, and other people involved in the industry, but also to put smiles on fans' faces and um, perform for them, and just have a positive impact on so many different people in different ways.
Exactly. Ross, I want to say thank you so much for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find out more about you on social media? And if there's anything you want to plug, feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Stanley. I'm doing different podcasts like this one, so I enjoy talking about my experiences and memories, but also my perspectives on the industry today and the direction I think it's going in. So if audiences want to hear me, I'm on different podcasts like yours, but I'm also on Facebook and Instagram as well. And Twitter, or what was formerly Twitter, I guess. I don't know what they call that now.
X.
Yeah, X, yeah. So I have accounts there. So, you can certainly drop me a line and send me a comment, But I always enjoy hearing from fans and those who reach out to me and, who, um, enjoy my experiences and recollections and reflections.
Yeah, it's all about the fans.
It sure is.
All right. Well, Ross, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Thank you, Stanley. Pleasure was mine.
All right, take care.
Take care,
This
Stanley.
is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.